2. So welcome to home run class number 6. I hope everybody's doing okay. We just heard from Jake and Paula. They're rebuilding their house in Florida after it got whacked by the recent hurricane in Florida. So, dealing with insurance and repairs, it's pretty much a nightmare. But you have to keep going, and every day you wake up and, we all work hard, and the harder work you work, generally speaking, the luckier you get. So I don't remember who said it, that it's almost impossible to defeat somebody who gets up early and works hard day after day after day. Daniel, do you know who said that?
Did you say it?
Oh, no, I wish I had. No, it's there's a famous quote from, I think, a US president who said, who was born in poverty, but if you work hard, generally speaking, you'll do well. Something else, though, that we're going to deal with today a little bit is that working hard is great, and you've heard this, don't work hard, work smart. That generally, I don't think is very helpful advice, because almost all of us as entrepreneurs put in tremendous hours, and there are no shortcuts. Tim Ferriss, when he wrote the 4-Hour Work Week, I don't think he helped entrepreneurs at all. And people who say don't work hard, work smarter, probably aren't helping either. But having said that, I've said it before in this class that my wife has a better strategic brain than I do. She does. Dawn has a better strategic sense of things. And when I was younger, and I was a know-it-all. I knew everything. And I wasn't necessarily the greatest person to be around. Know-it-alls are kind of not necessarily the ones you want to hang out at the pub and have a beer with. And when I met Dawn, I'm sure she picked up on that pretty much right away, and yet she tolerated me somehow. But over time, I've learned that if you have a really good, important, person in your life, I think it's really worthwhile listening to that person. And recently, I was totally stumped on a real estate problem. I just couldn't solve it, and I talked it through with Dawn, and within a couple of days, she came back with an outstanding strategic decision that really made a difference and solved the problem. So you want to work smarter, and you also are going to have to work hard. There's no two ways about it. And then, if you have people around you that you like and trust, listen to them, right? Okay, so there you go. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to bridge the price gap. And I've been thinking about this for a long time because as real estate investors and developers, we're buying land, we're buying existing buildings, we're doing all kinds of negotiating all the time. We're leasing buildings, we're leasing apartments, commercial space, whatever. And, most people think that negotiating is simple. Daniel, you want to pay $100 for something, and I want to get $130 for that same something. And so most people think that the only way you can negotiate is maybe meet in the middle. Or if I'm in a stronger position, maybe I can get $129 and you have to pay almost the full price. Or if I'm in a weak position, maybe I end up accepting $101. All right. So most people think that's negotiating, and in a way it is. But are there better ways, to negotiate? Are there better ways to bridge that price gap? It's very important. And there are lots of creative things that you can do. And let me give you an example from my own experience. And this has nothing to do with real estate, but back in the day when I was running the Ottawa Senators and a real estate company that was probably $1 billion company, maybe a little bit bigger than that actually, we had 5 key employees: the president of the Ottawa Senators, chief financial officer, a chief marketing officer, vice president of sales. I think 5 key people. And one Christmas, I wanted to give them a bonus. So I did. I gave each of them a $66,000 cash bonus, which they appreciated for sure. Which in the scheme of things isn't probably as much money as you would see in a Wall Street bonus at Christmas time, which could be, $3 or $4 or $5 million. But anyway, for a relatively small company, a $66,000 cash bonus was worth something. Of course, on a cash bonus, you have to pay income tax. So they probably would have netted out maybe $40,000, and then they would have spent it, right? They would have spent it on something. And so a few months later, that $40,000, or maybe a few days later, that $40,000 is gone. The following Christmas, instead, I went to a furniture and appliance store, and I can't remember which one it was, but anyway, it was one of those big chains. And I wanted to buy, back in the day, a Sony picture-in-picture TV. Okay, that was the real thing, and the thing was big, but it weighed 230, 240 pounds. I mean, today you get these big TVs, you can pick them up with, 2 fingers. But back then, these damn things weighed over 200 pounds. You needed to be a pretty strong guy to move them, man or woman. So anyway, I went in there and I talked to the salesman, and I said, I want to buy 5 large screen TVs because I wanted to give them TVs for Christmas. And how much are they? And he said, well, they're $3,500. This is 30 years ago. So I don't know what that equivalent would be today, probably 10 grand. So anyway, his name was Darren, and I said, you're going to give me a discount, right? I'll buy 5 of them. And he said, yeah, oh, sure, I'll give you a discount. Instead of $3,500, I'll charge you $3,450. So give me $50 off. I went, damn, that's not very good. So I said, no, I'm not going to do that deal. Maybe I'll go 3,000, but I'm not going to go $50 off. Thanks very much. I walked out thinking he'd come running after me. No, he didn't. So I went back to the Canadian Tire Center where the Sens play, and I talked to my head of facilities. His name was Bob Braden, a big, strong guy, 6'2", 230, 240 pounds himself. And I said, Bob, go over and beat up Darren. I don't actually mean physically beat him up. I mean, just go beat him up on the price. So he goes over and shamefacedly, a couple of days later, reports back to me, he got him down to another $50. So I said, oh, damn it. So I went over there and I bought the 5 TVs for $3,400 each and gave them to my 5 top guys for that Christmas. Now, what Christmas gift did they remember for the next 20 years? The 40 grand or the $66,000 from the year before, or the TV?
The TV.
TV,
surprisingly, the TV.
Because every time their kids would turn it on and they would invite their friends over, oh, you got to see this. We got this picture-in-picture TV, which was all the rage back then. So you could watch 2 football games or 2 hockey games or something, one about this size and one this size. And then you could switch them, so their kids and their wives or husbands, whatever, parents, grandparents would come over and they'd say, oh, yeah, Bruce Firestone gave to us. And so for the next 20 years, I got credit for a $3,400 gift as opposed to a $66,000 gift. And I use that same principle when I'm doing leasing, whether it's commercial leasing or residential leasing. So let's say Dave came to me and he wanted to rent an apartment. Maybe the apartment is a $2,000 a month apartment. And he says, well, I'd like to get a month's free rent. I will say no to that. I'll say, well, what we'll do, Dave, is we have a nice premium for you. What's a premium, he'll ask me. Well, we have a free Costco membership for all our tenants this month. He goes, oh, that's awesome. So that's awesome. Now a free Costco membership back then was like $80. And believe it or not, your tenants will appreciate a premium like that. Like we've given out 2 $10, transit passes. We've given out free Costco memberships, which are, today they'd be $100 or $120, but back then they were $80. And they're appreciated more than a $2,000 free month of rent. Do you understand that? So when you're negotiating, And, I have a number of Asian clients, coaching clients that I coach and I work with. I have some clients in China, in Shanghai. And they are taught from a very early age to think and then rethink what they're doing, and to ask themselves over and over and over again, is there another path forward here? And I don't tend to do that as a younger person. I tended to, oh yeah, okay, I'm doing this. And then when I started my coaching practice and I started working more with people from China and other Asian countries, and it used to frustrate me. They would ask me to go over something 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes 6 or 7 times. I go, oh my God, we've already discussed that. But every time we went over it, the strategy got better. And I realized, I've got a lot to learn from these people. And so I pay, like I said, I pay closer attention to Dawn every year. I really treasure her company, of course, and her advice. And I've learned from my Asian clients to do the same thing, to think about it again and again and again and again and again. And you will improve it each and every time. And so I want you to try and apply that in your own life, and don't wait till you're 70 to do it. One thing I would like to share with you guys is I don't know if all of you are yet hooked up with the seminar or webinar I'm doing on Saturday. And I'm going to just put this Eventbrite link into the chat box one more time, just in case you haven't already registered. I think there's about 60 people who've registered. It's called Daydream to Reality. It's a bonus lecture. And if you'd like to attend, you have to register this time on Eventbrite, and you'll get the Zoom link probably Friday. But it's Saturday at noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. It's Daydream to Reality. And what it is it's an introduction to a course I'm going to do in February in Merida, Mexico, called Daydream to Reality. And the reason I decided to do this course is that I've been asking people, and you've heard me say this before, some of you have, I've been asking people for 40 years what their secret dream is, and pretty much everybody has the same secret dream. If you live in Florida or Arizona, your secret dream is to own a cabin in the woods in Minnesota or Ontario. If you live in a cold northern state or pretty much anywhere in Canada, your dream is to own a house on the beach. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to sort of provide people with a path to realizing their daydream without having to wait maybe till you're 70. And so what I want to do is I want to look at some different models that people, all of the people on this call and others, can do so that they can have their daydream, their hideaway, their Shangri-La, if you know what that is, but also one that has a real economy. And it's not just a glamping economy. I'm going to talk about different types of economies that you can run through that. And again, the objective here is to get a minimum of $10,000 a month from your daydream. So I'll put that in the chat box. And if you haven't signed up for it, it's free. And I'd like you, as many of you as possible, to join it, because I think you might learn something about that. All right, now I'm going to share a slide deck that I prepared for today. And some of it will be a bit repetitive, but sometimes when you teach a course, or sometimes when you write a textbook or a handbook, there's a bit of repetition, because it does tend to help students sort of, including yours truly. Sometimes you don't get everything the first time. You ever watch a movie and you kind of go, oh yeah, that was an okay movie. Then you watch it a second time, you go, well, that was actually really funny. I liked Groundhog Day. But I like Groundhog Day better the second time I watched it than the first time. I thought the first time, oh my God, this is boring. Come on, get on with it. The second time I just enjoyed, the progress and the changes, and I saw much more of the humor the second time, right? And so sometimes when you repeat things, it does help cement things in your head. And it is not good enough. And I'm sure all of you know this, but as a young person, I thought, what the heck? I got a textbook. Why do I have to sit in the professor's lecture? I can just read the textbook. It's not the same, at least if you have a good teacher, it's not the same. All right, so I'm going to share my slides. with you. Guess what it's called? Bridging the price gap. So while I'm going through these slides, I'd like you all to think about an example, if you can, an example of where you were in a negotiation and you did something interesting that helped you get a better deal. So I'm going to stop about midway through and say, hey, anybody, so don't be shy, okay, unmute yourself and say, hey, I did something really great and this is what happened. And I'd like to hear from you. So you've all we've talked about anchor pricing before, and I use it really all the time. Anchor pricing is when you're negotiating and, you know, for example, you're negotiating with an appraiser to try and get a higher appraisal. You might say to the appraiser, you know, I think that this building is worth $6.1 million. And I know you're thinking it's probably only worth $4 million, but I do think that if you look at all the numbers, it's worth 6.1 million. Obviously, the 6.1 million is the anchor price. And so maybe, and it works for me, maybe you get an appraised value of 5 million instead of 4.2 million. And that actually happened to me. And I was able to demonstrate to the appraiser, this is how I got the 6.1 million number. So my anchor price wasn't just something I grabbed out of the air. But I don't think I think if I said my anchor price at 5.1 million, I would have got an appraisal of 4.2 million or just slightly higher than that. So anchor pricing is really important in negotiating. And every time you see this, you know, you see like $100 crossed out and they say it's $75, you know, it's on sale or it's on special. $100 is the anchor price and $75 is the sale price, right? So you know what's going on, but it works. Human beings are very, very easily manipulated, all of us. Now here's some of the strategies I've used, okay? You know, if I'm advertising an apartment for rent, say this apartment rent, I want to get $1,280. If I'm running an ad on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace or wherever, I don't put down $1,280. What I do is I put down, hey, we've got this one-bedroom apartment for $985. But you also have to budget, I put in the ad, you also have to budget $135 for utilities, another $45 for parking, and we have a really great tech package you can you're going to buy for $115. So you can see I've got an error on this slide. It's supposed to say 985, not 975. So people think, so I've anchored the price low now. Do you understand that? You anchor it high with the appraiser and anchor it low with the tenant. And the tenant is going to say, oh yeah, I pay $985 for my apartment. And he or she is going to discount what they pay for utilities because somebody's got to pay that. And what they pay for parking because somebody's got to pay for parking, and what they pay for their internet connection, etc. Right? So it's not a bait and switch. This is not a bait and switch. You disclose in the ad all of that, but you never actually add it up in the ad. You don't. And it's amazing how people will say, you'll hear tenants talking, well, what do you pay for your apartment across the street? I pay $1,280. What do you pay, Mary? Oh, I only pay $985, but she's actually paying $1,280. So anchor pricing works both high and low, okay, if you sort of follow me. And if you're not following me, stop me at any time. And I've already talked about this, how to use it on appraisals. Anchor pricing is a little bit like the Goldilocks thing. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And we've talked about this before too. You always tell the truth, and as Daniel would tell me, tell the legal truth or the smart truth, right, Daniel? So you always want to do that. Tell the truth, but tell the smart truth. And here as a real estate broker, I get this all the time. How much are you going to charge us for your commission, Bruce, on selling this piece of land? And maybe if I was dumb, I would say, oh, listen, Bob, I'm going to charge you 5.5% commish. And he's going, oh, 5.5%, I could get it done for 2% by CBRE or somebody else like that. Why are you charging more than twice? That's the debate I'll get into. Instead, the smart truth or the legal truth is, look, I'd like to have 3% for myself and my brokerage. And I'd like 2.5% for the outside broker. It still adds up to 5.5, but you break it in two. So he realizes, Bob, my client realizes that I'm not getting 5.5%. Maybe I'm getting 2.5%, or I'm getting 3% for the brokerage where I work, and maybe I'm sharing that with some of the young guys. So I might end up with 1%. And I tell people that, right? I tell clients that. So again, smart pricing is part of negotiating. So when you're, whether it's an apartment building or a land sale or whatever, right? And we see it all the time. You know, you go into the BMW dealer, they've advertised, hey, we get a brand new BMW for 35,000, and you get there and they say, oh, did you want an engine with that? Well, that's extra. Steering wheels, oh, definitely an extra. And these days now they'll say, oh, you gotta subscribe to satellite radio and a bunch of other stuff. So they really know how to vacuum your money out of your pockets. All right. And then this is a famous example, and some of you have already heard this one. Coca-Cola proudly announced many years ago now that they invented a drink machine, a vending machine that raised prices when the weather got hot. And did they ever get a lot of SHIT for that? Oh my God, they got a lot of heck for that. Just when you need a cold beverage, that was a product placement. Just when you need a cold beverage the most, that was complete coincidence. Those gougers at Coca-Cola, they increased the price. What they should have said is that they had invented a machine that when the weather gets cold, lowers the price. It says exactly the same thing. And then they say, oh my God, aren't those guys at Coca-Cola great guys? When it's cold, you know, and you don't really need a sugary drink, they cut the price. They're great guys. Same, it means exactly the same thing. And that's what I'm trying to encourage you to do. And that's what many of my Asian clients are very good at. They're very good at, you know, putting things and framing things exactly right to get their way. Perception trumps reality. People believe what they perceive of you, and to them, this is an actuality when in reality it's not, right? Perception is reality for most people. I've been in the mini office business, and I'm going back into the mini office business in Belleville, gosh. Many offices are just furnished offices ready to go, and kind of the old version of co-working spaces. And here's some of the ones I've run. So I had floors 9 and 10 in Heritage Place, our building downtown on Queen Street. This is, you can sort of see it here. I don't remember how many floors I had, probably 26. And we had beautiful offices overlooking the parliamentary precinct. And then we had, so there were, I think 120 offices downtown. And then we had another 44 in another building I built called the Royal Bank Pavilion. We had 44 offices there. And then we were in the Lee Valley's Tools building on a lease. And we had probably another 30 there. So we probably had about 200 mini offices in total. And it was a very successful business, which when I was getting ready to, you know, go after the Ottawa Senators, I sold to a company, and it's now called TCC Canada. It's still around and it's very successful. And I wish I hadn't sold it. I wish I had it back. And I'm going to put some mini offices into this space. We already have a co-working space here run by the local college called Loyalist. And then these two bays, I was down in Belleville last week. We're going to convert those to mini offices. I'm going to call it Milford Station, mini offices for lease. It's we've renamed our building to the Burroughs Building. And here's my tagline: it's all happening. I liked it. So here,
I have a question. Sorry to interrupt. I raised my hand, but I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's the typical size? And I think you mentioned it before, but what's the typical size of, so did you own the full buildings, or you owned certain floors? And what was the size of those mini offices?
So the mini offices that I ran were buildings that I owned, except for the Lee Valley Tools building. Okay, Lee Valley Tools is a big manufacturer of gardening tools and other implements, quite successful. And we did have some mini offices in their building. Typical sizes of mini offices can be small, 100 square feet, to larger, 150 square feet. And we did have some, Jessica, we did have some offices that were quite a bit bigger, 300 and 500 square feet, where, especially for the tech companies, young tech companies, where they all wanted to be in one space, but they didn't want to be in a co-working space because they wanted to be able to yell at each other. Hey, Daniel, did you ever solve this problem? Alex, what did you do? Dan, what did you do? Dave, what did you do? Simon, what did you do? It's very creative. So some of them we call those maxi offices, but I don't really like that name because after we called them maxi offices, somebody came out with a product called maxi pads, and yeah, a feminine hygiene product. So we had to change the name from maxi. I don't know what we called it, maybe mini max or something. I don't know. But
okay, quick question. So were they closed, all closed office, or more open space?
Yeah, so co-working offices typically are open workstations, and mini offices are just what they sound like. They are private, they are secure, they have soundproofing. If you're a lawyer, you do not want to be in a co-working space. If you're an accountant dealing with private information, if you're a coach dealing with private information, if you're a technology worker dealing with code that can be stolen. If you work for, I have tenants who work for the RCMP, for the Canadian Security CSIS, and others, they are not going into a co-working space. So I'm not interested in running a co-working space. That's what Loyalist is doing.
Okay, and I had one last question. I forgot, it kind of slipped. Was it open? Is it in the mixed building? And is it the same tenant, or you have like a hot desk situation going?
Oh, that's a really great question. Human beings are incredibly territorial. And right from the day that they announced hot desking, where you come into, say, the Government of Canada, RCMP, Department of National Defense, I don't know, Shopify, and they said, instead of having 1,000 workstations for 1,000 people, we'll have 600 workstations for 1,000 people, and we'll just hotel them. So every day you come in, you take up a new workstation. Well, if you walk around workstations in these kinds of environments, you'll notice that workstation will have a picture of your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids, right? Everybody personalizes their space. Next day you come in, that workstation has been assigned to somebody else. They start fighting. They do. Well, you can't sit here. I want to sit next to Jessica. Jessica's right there. She's been there for like 2 weeks. I want to sit next to Jessica. And you're in my space. That's picture of my husband. Those are my kids. Get out. And then the person sitting there said, well, wait, there's no assigned seating here, so tough luck. So I don't like that, Jessica. I think it's a fail. That's my opinion. A lot of people would argue with me on that, but it's my opinion. So I'm not interested in that. Okay, but in the Loyalist space, it's just a bunch of desks, and you come in, that's your desk today, tomorrow could be somebody else's, and you have to move. But people are very territorial, so that's not my deal. All right, let me go back to where I was.
Okay, one last question. So what's the minimum size? Let's say I have a small space, like how do I know that I can do mini offices or even something open? Like, is there a minimum size?
Probably. It depends on what services you provide. If you have a receptionist, you probably need 40 offices to pay her salary or his salary. So a lot of the mini offices today are you walk in to your office, and if somebody's coming to visit you, you go out and get them. There's not a whole lot of services anymore. But back in the day, I think 40 to 45 offices was the minimum. But today you could have 5 or 6 mini offices with very limited services, and that would work. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. So mini office pricing. So this is back in the day. For an office downtown, you would have paid back when I was running it, maybe $980 a month, all in. That's a dumb way to advertise the space, just the way I was talking about the apartment. So what we would do instead is we would break it into 2 pieces. $785 for the mini office, and $195. We do this all the time for what we used to call a facilities charge, which covers their furniture, utilities, property taxes, reception if you have it, administration, mail handling, maybe some boardroom space, scanning, internet, Wi-Fi, and cleaning. And again, by breaking it into two pieces, it makes it much more digestible. And people understand on the facility charge, I mean, somebody's got to pay the property taxes, somebody's got to pay the utilities and all the other costs, and it's much more manageable. So that's how I would do it, Jessica, if I were going into the business again, and I am. Here's another example. I went through this one, which was a way to bridge the price gap when we were buying it. But when we owned it, I wanted to rent it. And I was asking back in the day, $26.65 for this property. And this nice couple from Toronto offered me $25.65. So we could have done what most people would do, which was maybe land in the middle of those two numbers. But I decided, no, I might be able to do something better. So maybe instead of cutting the price, offering them a month or half a month free rent, which is very expensive, I could have said no to them and waited for a better offer, but I didn't want to do that. I liked them. And then I could have offered them a premium. I could have said, well, I'll give you one of those Sony picture-in-picture TVs, which would be very expensive. But today you could get a TV for maybe $300 or $400. So a premium today is a little easier to do. You could have given them a Costco membership, which is about $80. There's some other premiums that I've done, believe it or not. I've offered to give them a vertical garden for their balcony, or even for inside, and you can buy these for a couple of $100. People love these things, and they really appreciate gifts, and which are called premiums in the industry, more than they do a month's free rent. I'll give you another example. This might interest you as well, Jessica. This is a client of mine who had a mini office space in downtown Ottawa, and for some reason, she was really struggling to rent her mini office. I couldn't figure it out, and she was prepared to give 1 month, 2 months, even 3 months free rent. And these were quite expensive mini offices. I think around $1,500 each because they were quite large. And she was, 3 months rent, if you think about it, is $4,500 she's giving away, and she still couldn't rent the damn things. So she asked me for a little bit of coaching. And when I got to know her a little bit better, it turns out that she owned a pub literally 2 blocks away. And I said, why don't you advertise that once a quarter, so 4 times a year, you'll give anybody in your mini offices a gift certificate for your pub for food. You can't, in Ontario, you're not allowed to give gift certificates for booze, but you can give $25 or $50 gift certificates or coupons redeemable at your pub for free food, and that's cool. She rented all of her offices like within the next 2 months. So instead of giving away up to $4,500 in free rent, she gave up maybe $50 4 times a year. And of course, that $50 doesn't cost her $50, right? I mean, it might cost her, $25 or $20 for the food, right? So it doesn't cost her very much. And when people come in, they don't just buy food, they might buy a couple of beers, and she makes money on that too. So that was amazing. I couldn't believe it. There you go. This is on the right-hand side. This is a very good friend of mine. His name is Larry Bravar. And he's what I would call, and I would say it to Larry directly, a hungover hippie. Right? You can't really see it, but he has hair kind of down to the, small of his back. And he's kind of an alternative guy. And this is his good friend, Jennifer Clark, as well here. And Larry was a wonderful, dear friend. Unfortunately, he passed away last year in Cuba, and he did not make 60. And I helped him develop a mini storage business called Cosmic Storage. So just think about the name Cosmic. That should tell you who named it. That was a Larry thing, right? He was a cosmic guy, and we did sell it because he decided to move to Cuba, we sold it to Peter Hodowitz, and he renamed it Just the Spot. And you can see that it has mini storage on it. It has RV and trailer parking. It has contractor yards on it. And it has an office here right at the front. Now, you know, I can't coach you guys or teach you guys to break the rules, but this office building on the second floor has a 1-bedroom apartment. And that is not a legal use. It is not. This is a zoned industrial, but Larry needed someplace to live. And I suggested to him, and he agreed that he might consider, and he's a wonderful builder, or he was, putting a 1-bedroom apartment up here, but calling it an office. And he did that, and he lived there for many, many years, quite happily, I might say. Again, the bylaws are there, and I suppose I should tell you that you should respect them all, but unfortunately, I don't believe that. But you have to make up your own mind. So Larry came up with a premium. This was his idea, not mine. What he decided to do was, if you rented a 10-foot by 10-foot mini storage shed from him, you got because he had lots of land, you got a 100-square-foot garden plot. If you rented a 10 by 20 mini storage unit, you got a 200-square-foot garden plot. And this is Larry. You know, there's his office, and he just had he had a knack for gardening, and it was hugely popular. And he also hired some local kids so that if Dan Wachna rented a mini storage place here, and he got himself a little garden plot, but Dan is too busy, expecting a baby with his wife in another month, right, Dan? Yeah, and too busy with his job at Sherwin-Williams and developing real estate. Larry would say, look, for a certain amount of money, not very much, these 2 kids will come in, they'll weed it, they'll feed it, they'll grow whatever veggies you want, and you can come back, they'll harvest it for you, put it in baskets, and you can come back at fall time, and you can feel like you know where your food is coming from. It was hugely popular, and provided a little bit of employment for a couple of kids, or a few kids, high schoolers. Anyway, that was Larry, and he was a wonderful man. And I have this lake that I dug out. You've heard about it many times, Dunrobin Lake, and we have largemouth bass in there. And for some of my clients, I say, hey, listen, in fact, tomorrow morning, I'm taking a bunch of my clients out to Dunrobin Lake, and guess what? We're going to go fishing. We're going to catch some largemouth bass and transport them to the ponds that they have and stock their ponds. And these are wonderful premiums, and people will remember you for a long time. And you can, develop a relationship with your clients, with your tenants, rather than, they're not the enemy, they're your customers. All right. Sometimes you could just offer simple things like, hey, how about if I give you a follow on Twitter or follow on Instagram? Maybe that's worth something to them. Or maybe, you know me, I'll give you a free book. I got like over 100 of them now. So, maybe, and of course, I just sent one to one of my clients in Florida, and I autographed it for him. The book cost $20. What do you think it cost? I'll ask Jake and Paul, what do you think it cost me to snail mail this book, a handbook, to Florida?
Probably like
more than 20 bucks.
$24.
That's a good guess, 26. So it costs more to snail mail it than it is to buy. So what we actually did, remember I talked about the gap on Ambleside Drive? I was trying to rent it to this Toronto couple, but what I did instead, this was a kind of an Airbnb thing too. I don't know, Paula, if you've ever done it, but what we did, because we just couldn't bridge that price gap, I said, there's a cupboard in the basement where we have stored some of our stuff. Would it be okay, while you're a tenant of ours, if I put a lock on that and I kept it, and I'll give you the lower rent? The rent was about $100 lower. And in fact, I made money doing that because we were storing some stuff at Diamond. Diamond is an indoor storage company. We were paying $244 a month for that. And And I was able to move the stuff out of Diamond into my own house or one of my rental properties, put it in the basement there, lock it up. And they didn't need any, and there were just a couple in this townhouse was huge, 1,700 square feet. They didn't need all that space. They didn't need extra storage space. They said, sure. So we were able to bridge the price gap. So I want you to think about all these creative ideas and solutions, which, I actually made money this way, right? I cut the rent by $100, but I cut my cost by $244. Figure it out. That's a good cap rate. All right. And then here's a young couple came to me. They had a condominium, I think a 3-bedroom condominium in Gatineau, Quebec, which is a small town in Quebec, close to Ottawa. And it was a beautiful condo. These are pictures of the inside. And, nice kitchen, 3 bedrooms, whatever else. And there's the little balcony. You can see the cupboard doors here. And so what happened was Mary and Adam talked to a local realtor, and they wanted, because they were young people and they were getting married, they wanted to, have a family. They didn't want to stay in a condo. So they wanted to sell it. But the realtor said, well, unfortunately, the demand for condos at this time is not great. We can sell it for $160,000 to $170,000. So you're going to lose about $20,000 to $30,000. And they're young people. That's a lot of money. Well, to anybody, that's a lot of money. And then they said, well, maybe we should just rent it. And he said, well, you'll get about $900. This is a few years ago. So if they had rented it for $900, they would lose probably $400 or $500 a month. If they sold it, they would lose between $20,000 and $30,000. So they came to me for some coaching. And I said, well, did your mom and dad teach you to buy high and sell low? They said, what? Did your mom teach you to buy high and sell low? They said, well, no. So I said, okay, let's think of another strategy. So what we did was we broke the 3 bedrooms into an offering for roommates. And they put an ad on Kijiji, $950 plus tech package, utilities, condo fees, property taxes, blah, blah, blah. You get a bedroom and you're part of a team of 3 professionals. They did, I think there was a premium. I think there was a local farm to table restaurant not far away, so that they did give each of the roommates like some kind of a premium, like a free meal or something like that once a year at this farm to table restaurant, which is walking distance from the condo. And here's Adam and Mary, and they ended up, they didn't get $2,000 or $3,000 back then, but they did end up with $1,685. So they actually ended up with probably about $500 or $600 a room rather than $900 a room. So they didn't get quite what they wanted, but it was a hell of a lot more than $900, and it was enough to pay all of their bills, including condo fees and property taxes and everything else, and make a little bit of money. And then they kept that condo, they refinanced it, and they bought a house. And that's what they did. So again, how you price things, how you sell things, how you frame things makes a huge difference. All right, now we'll talk a little bit more about buying strategies. The old term for getting seller financing is vendor take back. The new term, the more modern term, is seller take back, but they mean the same thing. And I'll talk a little bit about Chris Long and Longyards and what Chris did with a seller take back mortgage. This is Chris and his daughter Lily at the grand opening of Longyards. Remember, we talked about that. He has the mini contractor yards in Ottawa, and I think Florida now, North Carolina, Texas, and a few other places. And Lily is now a young teenager, but back then she was 9 or 10. I kind of bullied Chris into buying this. I really wanted him to buy it. 10 acres, almost 10 acres of heavy industrial land. He bought it for $475,000. And this is bridging the price gap. He didn't have $475,000, and he didn't have a great credit rating either. So he got 90% financing from the seller. The seller had had this for sale for, hundreds of days on market, very long. And I was able to talk to the seller and to the seller's realtor and say, I think that you should provide Chris with the financing to buy it. He'll turn a frog into a prince. He'll do something great with it. And I think your seller take back mortgage or vendor take back mortgage will be very secure. So they gave him a 3-year term on his seller take back, but he hadn't quite finished his development of the property. So these sellers were very accommodating. They extended it to 5 years. So it was 9.6 acres of heavy industrial land. His first phase, when he was putting in his first contractor yards and renovating the existing building, he spent 250 grand. And then he got an appraised value of 1.18 million. And then he did a second phase, which cost him $875,000 to build out the entire site. His total cost ended up about 1.6 million. And just before Christmas of last year, he got an appraisal at 3.6 million, which was a terrific result. But this was the key. This was how he bridged the price gap, a 90% loan to value seller take back mortgage. And I think it was at like 3 or 4%. So a pretty good rate. I think I showed you guys this picture. This was the house on the property when we first went to look at it. And Chris said, well, I guess I have to tear that down. I said, you're never going to tear this down because it's industrial. If you tear it down, you'll never be able to build it back. Does that sound familiar, Dan? Dan Walkner? Right. Don't tear it down, renovate it. And he's a renovator, he's a licensed carpenter. So this was the garage. This is the street view. I mean, can you imagine? Nobody wanted to buy it. But then this is what he did with it. He's got I think a 2-bedroom up here. He's got another 2-bedroom in the basement, and he's got his site office here in the garage. And he did a wonderful job fixing it up. It's something that you, Jake, and Paula could do in no time. This is the side entrance to the basement apartment. That's the side entrance to the upstairs. This is Chris in his garage before he was finished. So this is where his site office is. You can go to the house from the site office, but you can lock that so the people upstairs have privacy. There's a window to the front to Bank Street. This is Lily holding up Chris's business card on the day that they opened. This is Chris starting to show off his contractor yards, which are typically 40 or 50 feet wide by 100 feet deep. So they're probably about 5,000 square feet. And some of them are half that size, sort of 50 by 50, so 2,500 square feet. And what you don't see here yet is the gates, and you don't see the privacy screening. That's important. And he does a wonderful job with his signage, and signs are great. They work hard for you 24/7, 365, and you don't have to pay anything for them, right? So it's been a blowout success, and he's building them all over the place. And you know that it's one of the things I'd like to do too. So this is the 10 acres that he bought. And his last name is Long, remember that. So Longyards makes sense, right? But this is also a long, skinny piece of property. And so when I saw this and Chris saw it, I said, oh my God, it's Longyards. And it's been a huge, and the brand is great. And so I think this is the house here, that's Bank Street here. And he just put a street down the middle, just gravel. And then he put his small yards, you can see on the top of the screen here, and then his larger yards down here. It's been a blowout success. All right, enough of that. And then I'll show you something that my daughter Rachel did with her husband Patrick. They wanted to buy this house in, oh my God, Whitby, Ontario. And this was at the height of the pandemic, and they wanted a house because they wanted to have a baby, and they now have a baby. Her name is Grace. And she's the cutest little thing. She's about 3 months old. So they wanted to buy this place, but there were so many offers. So I said, why don't you guys write a letter? So you can bridge the price gap, if there is one, by throwing yourselves on the sympathy. You can go for the sympathy vote. Politicians have been doing that for a long time. Yes, I was unfaithful to my wife, but here she is. She still loves me. Forgive me, right? I mean, that's a typical politician move, right? And so she wrote this, Rachel and her husband Patrick wrote this letter to Barbara, who was the seller. Thank you for allowing us to visit your home last Friday. We wanted to write you to let you know how much we loved your house. This would be our first family home, and we are so excited about the prospect. We were supposed to get married this year, but regretfully, after a lot of planning, we had to postpone due to the pandemic. We worked hard to save the money for our wedding and down payment for a home, and now we want to put our funds to good use. What could be better than buying our first home? This is the perfect home for us. It's a 2-minute drive to Pat's workplace. It's so close that he'll be able to come home for lunch on weekdays. Pat's a union man, a Red Seal member of the Boilermakers, and by the way, he's also a talented musician and composer. If we are fortunate enough to be able to purchase your home, he has plans to set up his first recording studio in your basement, a lifelong dream of his. Your home is also an ideal place for us to start our own family. We both grew up in large families, and our parents' homes were where everyone gathered. We see our future children playing in the backyard or in the park across the street, maybe even coming home for lunch. Anyway, you can imagine the rest. Now, who do you think, Paula, who do you think actually wrote that letter?
Was it her dad?
It would have been.
Yeah, with you.
But there were 5 bids on the house. Theirs was the second lowest, and they got it. Okay. So I said that Rachel and Pat, they actually did a first draft, to be fair, but it was terrible. So I tore it up and I rewrote it. And that's what, and they signed it and they sent it in. All right, let's look at another one. So here's another one. This is 93 Le Breton, which is a very hot area in close to downtown Ottawa. And this was a halfway home for battered women, and it was suffering a structural failure, and it had degraded terribly. Hard use. And there were a lot of bids for this as well. And most of the developers who bid on it were going to buy this thing and tear it down and build something really big, an 8-story building. But my client, Chad Robinson, and his beautiful wife, Muriel, wrote, very similar to Rachel and Pat, they wrote a sympathy letter. And they said in that letter, if we are lucky enough to buy this, we are not tearing it down. We will guarantee that we will not tear it down. We will renovate it into 6 apartments, and we will add to Ottawa's supply of apartments, and we'll fix the structural problems, sell it to us. And again, there were, probably 6 or 7 bids on this, and theirs wasn't the lowest, but it wasn't the highest, and they got it as well. So sometimes if you know what you're doing, you can appeal to the sellers. In this case, it was a not-for-profit, and they didn't want to see it torn down. There was a lot of, history in this building. They just didn't have the funds to renovate it and deal with the structural issues. And I put this in here just because I thought it was really cool. Here's Chad showing me what he did. You notice how underneath this balcony, they have another window. There's a bedroom down here. And when I walked in, I said, Chad, it's going to be a little dark down here in that bedroom. When are you going to get some sun? So he came up with an idea, or we came up, I don't remember how we did it, with an idea of cutting, I don't know if you can see it, cutting out this part of the deck and putting Lexan here. Lexan is, like bulletproof glass. You can jump up and down on it, even if it's cold weather, and it won't break. And you can sort of see on the right-hand side how the sun's rays can now penetrate, and you can get a little bit of light in the basement, right? I just thought it was cool. So here's some things that we did. If you look on the right-hand side, there's a couple of extra doors here. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see my cursor moving up and down, Paula? So there's a door here and a door here. And the only changes I really made to the design was I said, Chad, for this apartment here and this apartment here, you have an opportunity to extend your deck, as they did, and have a door to the outside. And every time, I'm a broken record on this. Every time you add a door to the outside for an apartment, you add value. And those are the most popular apartments. So if you're a single mom or a single dad with a kid and a dog, you'd much rather have your own window and door to the outside than to have to go through a common entrance. So it is a 6-plex, and 4 of the units are accessed through one door, but two of the units here and here have their own access, and these are the most popular. I'm going to skip over this one. It's going to take too long. This one I think I've talked about before as well. How do you develop $2.1 billion project with just $5 million in cash? This project is, again, another one in Ottawa. It's called Zibi, and it straddles the land between Ontario and Quebec. Very scenic. It's right in the middle of the river, and there's some islands there. There's some power stations there. And Jonathan Westeindy, who's a brilliant young man, wanted to develop it, and this was a signature project for him. It's going to be a mixed-use project with office space, co-working space, industrial space, workshop space, residential apartments, condos, you name it, mixed use. And it's a fab. So how do you do that if you've got $5 million? How do you buy a piece of land that costs a lot of money and then put a $2.1 billion project together? Well, here's a picture of Jonathan. I took that picture. I think I took that picture. Yeah, I did. What Jonathan did was he did a deal. His company's called Windmill. And he threw his $5 million in. And Dream REIT, which is based in Toronto, REIT is a real estate investment trust. So Jessica Roach, pay attention. You know, that these are the kind of people that you're going to need to be in touch with. Dream REIT also threw in $5 million. So it's a 50-50 deal. But where the hell did the balance of the funds, you know, the $1 billion plus they need to come from? The Dream loaned it to the project. So Jonathan ended up with 50% ownership of a $2.1 billion project with $5 million, right? And he had all the revenues from sales, you know, the commissions and what have you, all the commissions from leasing, all the property management revenue streams. He had the construction management contract, which would have been 15 or 20%. So you can imagine that Jonathan here with his $5 million ended up with hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And now why was he able to do this? Well, Dream wanted a local guy to run it. That would be Jonathan. He's well plugged in, and he's smart, and he's trustable, right? That's why they did it. And Dream's happy they've got somebody there. Now here's a trivial example of turning a cost center into a profit center. I do this all the time. So maybe there's a little bit of you know, Asian in me too. And this was a sign I wanted to build in Dunrobin. This is back in the day, you know, it's got to be 20 years ago. And I went to the city and I said, we really, it's a little village, you know, I built the village basically. You know, I built a couple of hundred homes at least in the village. So it became a village. And I said, you know, can we put up a sign? Can the city? No. We can't afford it. You know, it's a $2 billion a year corporation, but no, we can't afford a goddamn $3,000 sign. Oh, thanks very much. So I said, I'll do it myself. Okay. They said, sure, yeah, you're a sucker. So what I did though was I created this sign, and you notice all the ears on it. There's like 16 of them. Maybe there's on two sides, but I think it was just one side. And I sold them to local companies. I sold each of these ears for $25 a month at 300, and there were 16 of them, and I made them commit to 2 years. So I got about $9,600 for a sign that cost me $1,200. So I even turned a sign, you know, into a profit center, right? So Jake, if you were doing a land development and you were putting up a sign, you know, your realtor should pay some of that. Your other people who are working on the project, you know, your plumber, your electrician should all pay something to put their signs up. I believe that real estate, like pretty much everything, is making a little tiny bit of money on everything you do. And, you know, most people think of a company like IBM, you know, which probably does $130 billion a year in revenues, is invulnerable. But I can tell you, I did the calculation. If IBM did not collect any of their receivables from their many contracts for 90 days, they would go out of business. It would not take long for a company the size and scale and history of IBM to go out of business. So whether you're IBM or you're Prof. Bruce, every little thing you do should be a profit center. All right, let's keep going here. How are we doing for time? We're doing good so far. I don't know if your wayfinding signage in your town is as crappy as ours, but Ottawa has signs, you're approaching a G7 capital 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers away. They're pieces of crap. Like, and hunters go out there and they shoot the sign. So usually there's holes in the signs, saying, welcome to Ottawa, just a crappy little sign, looks like it's going to fall over any minute. And it's got bullet holes in it, right? Shotgun blasts. So I said to the National Capital Commission, we're a G7 nation. We should have real signs. So one of my clients designed this for us, giant, like 20-foot maple leaf, 100 kilometers from Ottawa, and all, on the border with the United States, and, the approaches from Toronto, Montreal, what have you. Let's put up these huge signs. Welcome to the National Capital Region, population, whatever. And these elements here, the population signs, would actually, be live. They would have they would tick over as every time, somebody moves to Ottawa. It would get a little bit, it's like bursts, it would go like that. And you'd have time and temperature, distance, all of that here. But we would have advertising on, major companies headquartered in Ottawa, like Shopify, might be convinced to pay for the. And today that wouldn't be a billboard, that would be an Activision sign. So you'd sell time on it, right? And you could really make money. So even for, wayfinding signage, I think they should be profitable. But the NCC, the National Capital Commission, like most governments, they think 25 years is a near-term horizon. So I'm not counting on seeing these anytime soon. Here's a couple of young fellows that actually met in one of my classes. This is when I was teaching at Carleton. Alex, you there? This was Fred Carmesino and Brian Samuel. Brian was an architect and Fred was a business student, and they came and joined my class. And a few weeks before graduation, Brian came to me, and separately Fred came to me and said they didn't want to go and work for somebody else. Fred was the one who told me that JOB stands for Journey of the Broke. They just didn't want to. I said, Fred, what do you want to do? He said, I have no idea. I'm really good at sales and I don't want to go and work for anybody else. I want to work for myself. And Brian is an architect who is very independent. He was the same. He did not want to go and apprentice with some other architect because he has very definite views on architecture. So within a few days of each other, they came to see me and I said, I think, Brian, you ought to meet Fred. And I said to Fred, Fred, I think you ought to meet Brian. You're classmates. So I got them together and they actually started Maple Leaf Design and Construction. And it's still going strong. Here we are at least 20 years later. And, it's been very successful. And, how did they start out? As home builders. They had no money, like, maybe they had $500 between the two of them. Actually, I think Fred probably had a little bit of money, but I don't think Brian had any, but not very much. So what we did was we found a friendly developer who had, I think, 10 or 15 lots that he hadn't been able to sell in a subdivision. So I helped Fred and Brian negotiate a deal with a land developer. And I talked to the guy, I know him, and I was friendly with him. And I said, they're nice boys and they're good fellows and they'll do a good job. Can they option 10 lots from you? And the land developer said, sure, yeah, I got 15 or so lots I haven't been able to sell. So yeah, how much are they offering? I said, $500. He said, $500? That's each lot. No, $500 for all 10. He said, $50 a lot for an option. I said, yeah, that's all they can afford. But what they'll do is they'll move a trailer onto the site this summer, and they'll sell homes from the trailer with great plans that Brian has already been working on. And they'll take deposits from those home buyers. And they've got great trades who are willing to give them terms, right? So wait for payment. And you will give them those 10 lots and they will pay you on closing. So you're really not financing Fred and Brian, you're financing the home buyer. And the guy was really struggling to sell the last 10 or 15 lots. He did the deal. And Brian and Fred went out Brian was busy in the trailer designing stuff, and Fred was there, roping people in. He'd practically flag them down on the road and, and arm wrestle them. And they would take, $40,000. Back then it would have been $20,000 deposits on each house. Today be 40. And then they would take progress draws from the buyer. So back then, a $400,000 house, they would probably have at least $300,000. Jake, I've talked to you about this. They'd have at least $300,000 in deposits before closing, right? And that cash, these are not condos, that's cash you could touch, feel, and spend. So they'd have progress draws. And it went really, really well. So after they had done 10 homes, and they were making probably back then, $60,000, $70,000 a home. So not very much, but they're making something. But if they had done 10 or so, they had $600,000 or $700,000 of cash in the bank. And they were off to the races, and the rest is history. Here's another one. How would you like, Jake and Daniel and Dan and Jessica and everybody else, how would you guys like to get free labor when you're building a home, right? This is a young architect I coached. Her name is Dominique, and her husband Frank, and they build beautiful straw bale homes. And they have a property in Quebec, which is 350 acres. 150 of that is 2 beautiful lakes. And they do workshops to teach people how to build straw bale homes. And people will pay to come there and learn design and learn construction techniques. And they'll pay Dominique and Frank to work on their homes and build them. And as a result, I don't know how many of these buildings, you can see one here on the screen here. You can check Solistera, you can Google Solistera if you want to see more pictures. But they build these wonderful structures that you can heat with probably a kerosene heater. They're incredible, and their labor costs are virtually zero, right? So again, that's how you bridge the price gap. When you don't have all the money in the world, but you have skills, and you're brainy, you can figure it out. All right, here's another one I'll talk about. So this is again the building that I've been working on now for 2 years in Belleville. It's giving me a headache. I needed construction financing of $4 million on it, and the appraised value was only $5 million. I was hoping for 6, right? So I would have needed a construction loan of 80% loan to value, but it's very hard to do that. So the construction lender said, "Oh, I'll give you 65%." So I was 15 points away from having enough money to finish this damn building. $750,000 gap. But my primary residence, which you can see here, is valued at about 1.15 million. So if you're prepared, I'm not saying you should do this, but what my wife and I decided to do so we could get the money to do this, is if you're willing to allow a blanket mortgage over your construction project, and in this case, over our primary residence, then you have a total asset package of 6.1 million. And now your $4 million construction loan is 65%. So if you have some other properties that you own and you're willing to tolerate the risk of making it a blanket mortgage, in other words, the mortgage is on more than one property, could be on 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 10, but it does tie you up, right? So the theory is good, but there are risks. So the theory is good because it allows you to complete the renos, and then hopefully you reappraise it. In our case, at 6.1 million, you refinance, and then you remove the blanket. But there are risks, right? What happens if the project is delayed, or cost overruns, or real estate values start to fall like they are now? And your primary residence, in this case, my primary residence with my wife, is tied up, right? We can't sell it, we can't refinance it. We have a blanket mortgage on it, right? So you have to be aware of the risks, but this does actually work. All right, so we're going to stop for a moment, and I'm going to check the chat box, see if I missed anything. Daniel says, did Shopify exist when there was a hall? No. And Dave Wallace said, timing is everything. I agree with that. All right, so are there any negotiating tactics that you've used that you want to share? Take it away.
Nothing new, but we've had great success with vendor take back, and also we've done Paula's done the letter thing to homeowners or.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah, she does it all the time.
Yeah, I think because Paula's a realtor, right? She knows how to preach to people.
Yeah, even before I was a realtor, though, there was a time where we wanted to live on a very specific street. And I hand wrote cards to every house on the street and like every homeowner on the street. And we went door to door with our kids in the stroller, making it more like, here we are as a family, we want to live on the street. And it wasn't a very big street. We heard back from 3 people and we made offers on 2, and then ultimately actually ended up living on a different street. But yeah, it was a good success.
It does seem to work. The human touch can work. I've done it many times, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but that's great. And the seller take back or vendor take back thing is very powerful. I mean, for Chris, it made him a multi-millionaire because, I mean, he was making $18 an hour as a licensed carpenter back then. And now lives in Florida and, has a real success on his hands. All right. Anybody else got, an idea of how to negotiate?
Oh, sure.
That's okay.
Yes. Hey guys,
Hey,
I'm
Karina.
here. I look like Dave, but I'm here. One thing that
I'm here
we've
too.
done is ask for an extended close. It's kind of similar to one of the examples you gave, but in the sense that, okay, we're happy to give you what you're asking for. The numbers look great, but give us an extended close so that we can get the zoning amendment approved or the site plan approved. Once that gets approved, then we close at that point in time. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it allows you to force that appreciation by the time you close. Right? Or you could find the buyer who's going to buy it from you with approved plans, and then they're closing on it, and you're just, I guess, in a sense, double closing it at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's a good one. I like that one. The extended close is I've used that too, but I didn't put that in my notes, so I like that. Anybody else? All right, let's go back to the slide back then. Let's see where we're going to go. Oh, I got to show you this one. This is the story is actually kind of funny. It's pathetic too, but funny. So here's an example of another bridging the price gap. So Jay Curry is a client of mine. He's the owner of a chain of restaurants called the Barley Mow. And you can see on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, this is one of his pubs in Almont, which is a small town in Ontario you can see on the river there. And in 2009, I think it was, maybe 2010, Jay came to me and said he'd like to buy, this really beautiful house in Stittsville that was for sale. Stittsville's a West End, Ottawa suburb. And I think they were asking almost $1.5 million for the property. And it was a really tough recession. And we're going into a recession, I think, almost for sure. And there are going to be incredible buying opportunities like this. So I went to see the owner. This was a for sale by owner. So Paula, there were no realtors involved. I was a realtor, but I was acting only for the buyer. So I went to see the owner. He was a construction guy. And I said, look, my client's prepared to offer $865,000. The guy said, that's ridiculous. It cost me $1.5 million to build it, which I believe is true. And that's horrible. But I said, well, that's all Jay is willing to offer. So I wrote it up, and we went back and forth with the owner for a number of weeks. And eventually we settled on a price of $875. He was in financial difficulties. He had to unload it. But before he signed it, I said, could you please get your own realtor? I do not represent you. Could you get your own realtor? He said, I'm not paying a realtor. It's bad enough I have to pay you, but I'm not paying anybody else. I said, I really think you should have somebody read this before you sign it. Could you ask your lawyer to sign? I'm not paying a lawyer either, right? I said, you really should. He said, I'm a construction guy. I can read the contract and I can sign it if I want to or not. So he signed it. And 2 weeks before completion, I do get a call from his lawyer finally saying, you know, you so-and-so, Bruce Firestone, you have stolen $225,000 of his chattels, a really high-end sound system, a home theater system, high-end appliances, his tractor, his ride-on mower, his plow, his tools and equipment. I put everything. And he you know, and the lawyer said, look, my client thought these were chattels excluded. I said, well, if you look at the contract, it says chattels included. He said, well, he didn't understand that, we're not closing. Oh, I said, I think you will close. He said, well, you're under advisement, you know how lawyers talk. Oh, you're under advisement that we're not closing. I said, well, wait a second. You don't close, Jay Curry will pay the land transfer tax, register his agreement on title, and you will not be able to sell it or refinance it to anyone else. I don't care if it takes 10 years, you're going to sell it to Jay. You know, and anyway, he says, well, I'll have to consult my client. I said, oh, wait, before you do that, can I send you some of the emails that went back and forth between me and your client? So I sent him the emails that saying, could you please, please, please get a realtor? No. Could you please, please, please get a lawyer to read this before you sign it? No. So 2 weeks later, they closed. They had no choice, right? But there you go. You know, you can take advantage of that situation. As a realtor, I'm required not to say anything that's untrue to a seller or to a buyer. But if I don't represent the seller or I don't represent the buyer, I don't have to do anything other than make sure I don't say anything that's untrue. So anyway, that house today is worth about $3 million. So Jay did okay. Here's another one that I'm working on now. This is confidential, so I'd ask people who are watching this, you know, to be careful with this. So a client of mine is negotiating to buy a quarry. And the asking price is $12 million, which my client doesn't want to pay. Here's the plot plan. So it's about 60 acres. Here, it's a sand pit. It's got frontage on Bank Street. It's not far from Longyards, the first Longyards. And it looks kind of like an L shape that you can see here. So my client and I have been working on highest and best use. So here again is the land, the L shape. This is just me drawing it up. And we have a high ridge here, which is a great place for some interim income. So you can put some contractor yards here, equipment storage here, many storage buildings. He could develop some income and some buildings immediately on about 7 to 10 acres. And then this blue line here is where he's going to excavate. And we got permission from the ministry, or the quarry operator got permission to go down. So he's going to end up with a beautiful pond. You can see that other quarries in the area are doing the same thing. They're going down. So you create these beautiful ponds like Dunrobin Lake. But here's the cool thing that we found out. He can make money selling the sand, about $10 a ton selling the sand. But he can import clean fill and get paid for that too. Because whenever you do an excavation, right now there's an excavation going on Parliament Hill, about 200,000 or 300,000 cubic meters of rock is coming out of Parliament Hill. And as long as you can chemically match the soil, you can put it back here. So he's going to get $10 a ton as he takes sand out, and he's going to be paid $5 a ton as he accepts clean fill. He's making money coming and going. And the reason he's doing that is at the end, about 13 years from now, when the quarry is exhausted and the pit license is surrendered, he wants to use the balance of the lands for an industrial subdivision. So think about this. You're excavating about 40 acres here, and you're going to refill about 30 acres of it and leave about a 10 or 12 acre pond. The pond is a beautiful thing, and I want him to leave it there because the recreational use goes very well with industrial. Something else he's going to do, if we're successful in buying this, is he's going to put something called an earth depot on here, which is less than a truckload of stuff. So we're going to have not just big operators who need sand taking hundreds of thousands of tons or millions of tons. We'll have people who come in with their little trailers and need, you know, a bucket load of sand or gravel or anything else. Very profitable. I've got some clients in this business. A wonderful business to be in. So again, more interim income for him. Now, how is he going to finance this? Well, BDC, Business Development of Canada, will finance for my client 65 to 80% of the deal with a mortgage and up to 95% with a line of credit. So he probably can get 95% financing on this because he has strong financials. So BDC will give him a mortgage and a line of credit enough to buy it up to 95%. Or he could do 65% loan to value with just a commercial first mortgage and do a 25% RRSP mortgage, second mortgage. That works really well. And I've done lots of these. And in fact, I'm going to do another one for myself as I have projects underway. Here's another way to bridge the price gap that I've used over and over again. If you want a reduction of, say, 10% in the purchase price and you can't get it, you could say to the owner, listen, you can retain a 9.9% stake in the business and give me a 10% reduction in price. Simple to do. Why is it 9.9%, not 10%? Because in Canada, I don't know if it's the same in the United States, but in Canada, anybody who owns 9.9% of your business, you can squeeze them out at any time. In other words, you could say to the owner, say 5 years from now, I want you gone. The only question is not whether he's going or not, but the price you pay for that 9.9%. It's called a squeeze out provision. So that's why it would be 9.9%. There's other things that I've done. Maybe some of the compensation for the seller is maybe a consulting contract for the next 5 years, where you just pay the owner some monthly fee to come in and, you know, maybe consult a little bit here and there. So some of the compensation could be in the form of consulting. Maybe you could give the seller, in this case, who's been in the quarry business, some tonnage. Say, listen, lower the price, but I'll make sure that anytime over the next 13 years, if you want some tonnage of sand, I'll give it to you for free up to a certain amount. Maybe the seller has some equipment that he wants to park on the site. And you say, look, for 3 years, you can park your loader and dozer and trucks on the site. I won't charge you anything for it. And maybe you could give the seller a royalty on every sale for every ton that's sold. You know, so you get a lower purchase price, but you're paying something ongoing. If you think about these things like paying a royalty, you're really not paying it. It's the business that's paying it, right? So it is really a lower price in a way. So the deal on the table is my client will offer just over $10 million. So we never offer an even price. So it's not 10 million, it's 10 million and 5,000, right? So it looks like there's some thought into it. The covenant of my client is very strong. He has the ability to close, and he won't take 4 months to make up his mind. He'll have a conditional period of 2 months rather than 4. And how is it going to get paid? He'll put down a $105,000 deposit. He'll put down another $3 million in cash on completion, and he is asking for a $6 million seller take back mortgage, okay, for 15 years at 3.5%. But if you look at that $6 million, it's actually broken into 2 pieces, a $4 million mortgage and a $2 million bonus paid at the end. So it's kind of similar to what you were saying, Karina, where it's like an extended closing. That $2 million is paid at the end of the mortgage, or is paid from land sales at the end of the process. All right. So there's lots of different ways to cut the cheesecake. And I wanted to show you, this is again confidential. The pit has about 4 million tons of sand yet to be excavated, worth about $40 million. If he accepts 2 million tons of clean fill, and probably be more likely 3 million, he'll get paid another $10 million. So it gets paid going and coming. And the uplands, where the 10 acres, which is a rocky sort of outcropping, where he can do some contractor yards, et cetera, is probably worth $400,000 an acre. So that has a nominal value of $4 million. The balance of the lands, almost 40 acres, 13 years from now, once the pit license is surrendered, probably be worth $750,000 an acre, possibly $1 million. So that's worth another $29 million. So for basically a $10 million price, I think he stands on a gross basis to make about $83 million. That is pretty good. All right, any questions before we go on?
Yes, quick question. So the delay on the last slide, the last bullet, when you kind of reflect on what Karina said. So who's getting that? Yeah, no, you were there, the bonus in bold. Just go, yeah, here. So 2 million bonus paid at the end of term. So they're bringing that to the seller on the VTB.
It's exactly what
Okay.
Karina was talking about, an extended closing. So they'll close soon, but that $2 million, out of that 10 million bucks, 2 million will get paid possibly 13 years from now, or 14 years from now, or even 15 years from now. Right? So $2 million paid 15 years from now is not worth 2 million bucks, right? In today's money. So that's what the plan is. And we haven't done the deal yet, but we're negotiating around this. So you can see a lot of the sort of the ideas that I've been talking about for the last hour and a bit are kind of wrapped up in this deal for the sand pit. Any other questions, Dave?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Bruce, you were talking about that barley mow, the lawyer not reading the contract and you threatening to, he was trying to say we're not going to close.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before, what you just said, and it just blew our minds. So can you blow that up? Can you explain that a little bit? How are you going to force him not to close?
So what happened was, you remember my barn dominium? I've shown it a dozen times, but that barn I built back in the day, and I did sell it along with a lot of other stuff to fund the Ottawa Senators.
Okay.
So I haven't owned it continuously for 25 years. I've owned it most of that 25 years, but not all of it. And I wonder if I have it. Hang on a second, Dave. I'll answer your question. I think I have it in here somewhere. If I can find it. I got to show you that too. Just give me a second here if I can find it. Maybe I don't. I was hoping I had the barn dominium in here. Maybe I do. Just give me one more second. No, I don't. So Dave, what happened was the buyer of the building, his first name was Peter. He bought it from me. He allowed it to degrade terribly. And this building has a special place in my heart. I saved it from the wrecking ball once and transported and rebuilt it on my site. And it was a place where my kids had great joy. So I was driving by the old barn one day and I noticed how sorry it looked and how sad it looked. It almost devastated, really. And I noticed there was a little for sale sign. So I called up the realtor and said, "Is the barn for sale?" And she said, "Yes." So I put in an offer. I think I paid, it was 4 acres of land in the barn. That was $245,000. About 3 or 4 days before completion, Peter calls me up, not the realtor, Peter. And he says, "We won't be closing on Friday." I said, "Oh, why is that, Peter?" He said, "Well, I haven't filed my income tax in 7 years." I said, "Oh, why is that a concern to me?" And he said, "Well, the barn was owned by Peter individually and his company 50-50. And it was his company that hadn't filed income tax for 7 or 8 years. And it had been delisted. And when that happens, when the company disappears, any property owned by that company escheats to the crown." I didn't even know what that means. Escheats is ECHEATS. It's a legal term. It means that Betty Windsor, when she was alive, owned half of the barn. You with me on that so far? The Betty Windsor's the queen, right?
Yeah.
King Charles III.
Yeah.
So I said, "You mean to tell me that half of this building is owned by Canada and half of it's owned by you now because you didn't file your income tax for your company for a bunch of years?" He said, "That's correct." I said, "Why is that of concern to me?" Well, he said, "They're not going to sign any documents to let me sell this to you because they're part owner now until I have sorted my situation out." So I said, "Peter, you didn't just find this out yesterday or today. You haven't filed your income tax in years. I didn't force you to sign this agreement." Well, he said, "You can get out of the agreement." I said, "I'm not getting out of the agreement. I want this building." So here's what I did, Dave. I told him right on the phone, I am going to register my agreement of purchase and sale on title, which Steve Shepherd, my lawyer, did. Cost $175. I paid the land transfer tax, which is, probably $2,000 or $3,000, registered the agreement on title. And I said, you are never, ever, ever selling it to anyone but me. And if I'm not around, to my kids, because it has a lot of meaning to us and you've allowed it to degrade. And then I went a step further. Now, this is beyond the law. Okay, Dave? So, you know me, I mean, I can't coach you guys to do this, but I said, oh, in addition to that, on the day of closing, we are going to serve you with documents. So my lawyer will actually go to your lawyer's office and serve the documents personally that we're ready to close, the funds are in place, etc. And your lawyer is then going to fail to close. Then we pay the land transfer tax, we register the agreement on a purchase and sale. But I said, the other thing I'm going to do is the next day I'm going to change the locks. He said, you can't do that. I said, well, I'm going to. I'm going to change the locks and I'm going to take occupancy of this building because you were not straightforward with me. You've had 6 months, so you didn't tell me this problem is not new. So you don't tell me what I can and can't do. I'm changing the locks and I'm going to start to fix it up because I'm not going to leave it for another winter. If I could find the pictures, Dave, you would see that this there should be a jail for bad building owners. You've heard me say that before. This was atrocious. Yeah. This was a beautiful building that he had allowed to degrade. It's now, again, a beautiful building. I rescued it a second time. So that's what we did. And he eventually got over so at that point, I didn't care if it took him 5 years to close. I had occupancy, I had de facto ownership. I cleaned it up. I started leasing it. I started renting it. I started animating the hell out of it. It took him about another year and a half to work out his situation with Canada Revenue. I didn't care. Now there's risk on my part because I spent money on it. I put a well in, and I already had the well. I put a septic system in there. He hadn't paid his electrical bill, so that friggin' hydro people had taken his meter away. I had to pay to have the meter. I mean, Jesus, it was a mess. But I'm a pretty determined guy, and I'm a fair guy. I was quite happy to pay him the $245,000, but I'm not going to be bullied either.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did.
Okay, so you have that APS, you don't want to close, you can, then you register the agreement, and then because of your registration, now they can't sell that property without coming through.
Yeah, it's just like, hopefully you guys will never get into a dispute with a contractor, but if you do, they have all the cards and you have none.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, for example, Dave, one of my clients had a beautiful house and a 10-acre rural property that he wanted to sell. And it needed a little bit of work. And he hired a contractor who I said, I do not like that guy. He has a terrible reputation, but he hired him anyway. The guy did almost no work on it. And then he said, I'll come back to you, Jessica, in a minute. So he then, maybe he had done $20,000 worth of work. He then put in an offer on this property because he knew we were going to sell it for probably about $1 million. He put in an offer of $450,000, Dave, less than half the value of the property. Mm-hmm. And when my clients, and I told them, there's no way they're going to sell it for $450,000. After you finish the work, we're going to sell it for close to $1 million. So they're not going to sell it to as is, where is for $450,000. He then put a $350,000 lien on the property. Hmm. That was a fraudulent lien, right? But he's got you over the barrel because this was a hot property and I would have no trouble selling it for $1 million, but you cannot buy a property that unless you can deliver a clear title. And so what we had to do was I sold it, I think, for about $950, and we had to pay, I think, 125% of the lien amount into court. So the lien was $350,000. We had to put in almost $500,000 paid of cash into the court to get the lien released so we could deliver clear title to the buyer. And then we had to litigate with that SOB for like 2 years until finally a judge did decide that it was a fraudulent lien and ordered the lien to be removed. And then my client got his $500,000, two and 2.5 years later, and minus probably $50,000 worth of legal fees. So if you, the number one thing in life throughout this course, I've said it over and over again, number one thing in life is trust. You know, and you have to trust your contractors because they have you over a barrel.
Okay.
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 And so, Jess, you're exactly right in terms of a lien. It's very similar to a lien. And so I've been doing it, and I would have done it on behalf of Jay Curry as well. If that lawyer had said, well, we're not closing because you stole his chattels, we would have paid the land transfer tax and registered the agreement on title. Some lawyers are not willing to do that. They consider it sharp practice. My lawyer is willing to do that because I want a lawyer who has my best interest in heart. Just the way, as a realtor, if I represent somebody, I want to go to the barricades for them. I want to represent them to the best of my ability. But if your lawyer refuses to register a lien like that, your agreement, then there is another way of doing it. And I don't like it as much, but you can do it. And it works. You can sue for specific performance. In other words, you can sue the seller and ask a court to compel the seller to close the deal. So you're not suing for damages. You're suing for specific performance. So you're asking a court to order the sale to be closed. And as soon as you launch a lawsuit like that, you can then register a notice of pending litigation on title. And that acts very similarly to a lien. Because nobody is going to buy a property, Dave, or Jessica, or anybody else on the call with a potential litigation facing them. So that's a little bit more expensive, but some lawyers are comfortable doing that and not registering an agreement of purchase and sale on title. But I tend to do the first because it's $175 and it takes almost no time. No, you do have to pay the land transfer tax, so that can cost you some money.
Wow, Bruce, you're dropping nuggets here.
I love it when you say that. Makes my day. It really does. I mean that. Let me show you a couple other things that I think will help you.
Well, you skip a part in the presentation. You said it would take too long. Maybe just shortening and saying what the project or the slide was about.
You're relentless, Jessica. I'm just trying to get through as much of this as I can, and you know, trying to teach you guys to be land developers. It might take about 40 years. You know, I've been at it. I'm 70, and I started when I was 28. So, yeah, that's like 42 years. So it does take a long time, Jessica, to sort of know all of this stuff. So what I'm trying to do, though, is give you a sort of a sense of what's possible. And then what I'd ask you all to do as my students is, when you have a specific problem, and Alex DiNardo, I have students from 25, 30 years ago still reaching back to me every once in a while saying, hey, what would you do if? So part of my, my commitment to you is that as long as I'm around, that is, if you're stumped on something, just email me, Jessica, and say, what would you do in this case? And I'll do my best to get back to you. All right.
Okay, and quick question. So how many lessons do we have?
So we've got home run lecture number 7, which is kind of 2 weeks from now. I'll send you the date and the time. And then lecture number 8 is going to be you guys presenting your case studies next month in November. All right. So, and that might take us a couple of lectures to get through because, you know, I think we're going to have, 6 or 7 projects. And if everybody takes 20 minutes, it's more than 2 hours. So we might actually spill into a sort of a bonus period, because I want to hear from you guys. It can't just be me talking for eight lectures. So lecture number 8 and maybe lecture number 9. And Jessica, I think you guys know I have been creating a handbook for you. So every single email that I've been sending you, every single one of these recordings are all in this book, and it's getting bigger, by the way. So it'd probably be like 100-page, maybe even 120-page course summary. It'll have every link in it, all the spreadsheets, all of the recordings, etc. So you'll be able to go back, for hopefully a number of years and review anything. Okay, so it'll all be there when, and this is a brand new course. So, I'm enjoying it too, because I'm learning new things and I'm creating new things. All right, so that's what we're doing. Let me just show you a couple more before we run out of time. Here's another one I'm working on now, which I kind of think is would be helpful to look at, bridging the price gap. And I'll share my screen with you again. So this one is a client of mine. His name's Sean, and I think I've shown you as well what he's trying to do. This is probably the most famous tennis training academy in the world. It's located about 34 minutes west of Nice, France, on the French Riviera, a beautiful part of the world. And Sean wants to bring this academy, and we've talked to the group behind this academy. They want to come to Canada. So we have now got, and all of this is coming, we have now got a 96-acre site tied up in Vars, which is about 25 minutes from downtown Ottawa, so quite close. And you can sort of see, here's the aerial photograph. This is 96 acres of agricultural land. It's got a house on it. It's got a couple of workshops on it. I'm not sure what this is. And this is the site that he has now purchased. So 108 acres. It's close to a giant Amazon fulfillment center. And as I said, it has a 4-bedroom house and 2 large detached garages or workshops and an above-ground pool. And one of the things we'd like to do on this property is we'd like to build this pickleball arena. This is actually, I think, in Florida. And look at this is a super cheapo arena. It's it's basically a coverall building with cheap metal grandstands, pickleball facility right here. And this, I built a $240 million arena. This thing is going to be a lot cheaper, but it'll make money. I'll show you a little bit more about it. So one of the things, this is the Canadian Tire Center, which we built for $240 million. Today it'd be over $1 billion. It seats 20,000 people. But look at this number on the left. We make $22 million a year in signage and sponsorship revenues. And we specialized in architectural signage. Anything that draws the eye is where you put a sign. So if you have a shot clock, you got a sign. It's very successful that way. So what I said to Sean is the highest and best use for this property near term, like immediately after he closes, will be to develop micro gardens and bunkies. This will not surprise any of you. Small workshops in the 2 existing structures. Develop develop a live-work situation, right? You've heard me talk about this, where somebody could have a small workshop, 200 square feet, 400 square feet, 800 square feet in those buildings, and have a room in the house so they could live and work in the same place. And do some outdoor pickleball courts and tennis courts. Phase 2, phase 3 will be much more extensive. You'll see in a minute. But this is something I've shown you before. This is a fantastic model for agricultural land. And that is to develop, to put small bunkies that don't require building permits on this agricultural land and create 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 square foot micro gardens. It's called backyard homesteading. And if we are going to see a really tough recession, which I think we are, and we're going to see interest rates continue to increase and inflation continue to be out of control, and if war continues to bedevil the globe, maybe get worse, people are going to rediscover backyard homesteading. My oldest son, Andrew, is a backyard homesteader in a big way. He raises chickens and other things in Australia. He's there with his family. And he says that your ROI on a backyard homestead where you grow tomatoes, nuts, fruits, vegetables, is like 1,000%. It's not 6% or 8% or even 10 or 12%. It's something like 1,000%. He's an economist, so I trust his judgment. So I think we're going to see tremendous demand where somebody can have a little bunkie like this and a little white picket fence and a 5,000 square foot plot where he or she or they can grow all the fruits and vegetables that they need for their family. And if they have a beer at the end of the day, they can crash in their bunkie and go home the next day. And you can buy these bunkies, which will sleep 4 people. From Bunkie Life, you've seen these before. For it shows $9,995, but Bunkie Life has reduced it to $9,500.
And quick question, Bruce. So how is sewage? How does sewage work?
So what we'll do here on this property, I go back on, maybe I'm going back too far. It is the bunkies will and the micro gardens will be in this agricultural land, which is very good agricultural land, but the bathroom facilities will be in the main house or the workshops.
And these are not long-term, like it's just for a weekend.
No,
like
no,
you said.
these are micro gardens that you'll rent with the bunkie for maybe $650 a month.
So people go there mostly for the garden and might stay over
Yeah,
there.
and let's say Jake and Paula were there with their kids, and I was there with my wife Dawn with my grandkids. You know, it's a nice thing to do with your family. You raise some crops, you teach your kids a little bit about growing things. You can them, you do whatever. But also, you know, if my grandkids and Jake's kids and Paula's kids, Dory and Van, do you have a third one, Paula?
We have 2 older girls too, Rylan and Tatum.
Okay, but the little ones are Dory and Van.
Dory
right?
and Van, yeah.
Got it right. And I do have your permission to include them as characters in my next story, right?
That's
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah, can't wait.
All right.
We already told them they're excited, so.
Yeah, Dory and Van. I've got it. I got the plot pretty much worked out. So, so Jessica, if Dory and Van are there, and my little grandsons and granddaughters are there playing, it's a wonderful thing. So what we'll do is we'll have the bunkies there, we'll have the micro gardens there, we'll have bathrooms, but we'll also develop a playland. Playland will be, you know, bocce court, pickleball court, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But I want to show you the numbers that go with this. It'll blow your mind. Right now, if you rent land to a farmer, you probably get $70 to $100 per acre per year. That works out, in this case, to about a 0.3% cap rate. So you could stick your money in the bank at 1 or 2 or 3% and do better, right? So just running the land to a farmer, Jessica, does not work. However, with just 30 of these mini homesteads, you could generate $117,000 a year and a 12.7% cap rate. And this thing, this agricultural land is humongous. It's 96 acres. So you wouldn't have 30, you could have 300. So I didn't put 300 in here because then you'd be looking at a ridiculous number. But you certainly could end up with, say, 90 of them here, and they're legal. And also, it is my view, this is the surest way to keep agricultural land in agricultural production. The surest way. Don't develop it. Put a bunkie there, rent it to somebody who's committed to growing his or her own fruits and vegetables with their families. And if you had 90 of them, you'd make over $300,000 a year from your farm instead of maybe $7,000.
Good question. When we remove the footprint of the houses and the septic and all the other things, I don't know what's the electrical system or the heating system for those. So once all of this is removed, what percentage of land stays, like, I don't want to say purely, but we would actually crop on it?
So with 30 of these mini plots, if they were all 5,000 square feet, it wouldn't be very much. So 30 times 5,000 square feet is 150,000 square feet. And you divide that by 43,560, you've used 3.4 acres of your 96 acres. That's it. 3.4 acres. So, you know, I wasn't kidding. You could have hundreds of these here. I'm not saying we'd do hundreds, but you could do 30 to start with, do 60, do 90. But in theory, if you did the entire 96 acres, or say 90 acres, you could have, I mean, like 900 of these things. You wouldn't do that, but you could. All right. So this is a very, very good model. And people in the States are doing it, people in Canada are doing it, but all the people that I know of that are doing it, almost all of them are my clients. There's a few who figured it out on their own, but most of them have learned it from me. This land is zoned agricultural, but you notice on this plan here that there's some low-lying areas at the back. And again, most people hate low-lying areas, right? They think, oh, that's wetlands, that's bad. That's an incredibly exciting opportunity for Sean, because I think it will mean that he can probably dig some ponds. And look, what can you see up here where my cursor is moving, Jessica and everybody? That's a pond. So I'm pretty sure, and think about this, if you had your little bunkie and you had your garden there, and then there was a bocce court and a pickleball court and a horseshoe ring and maybe some picnic tables and some barbecues, and you had a pond where you could you and your kids could go for a swim, that would be pretty cool. All right, so I think that's exciting too. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, although Jessica will probably roast me for not doing it in detail. Agritainment is now a legal use in the city of Ottawa. And by the way, the person who got that, or at least partly responsible for getting that in the official plan, was yours truly. So in Ottawa, I'm not sure it's true in every city, but in Ottawa, agritainment is now an approved use. So all of this stuff that we're talking about, having, you know, playland and pickleball courts and all this stuff, it's part of agritainment, agricultural entertainment, as long as the primary use is agricultural. So an agricultural zoning is actually today better than a rural zoning. That has never been true before, but it is now. And almost nobody knows that. This is a little secret, I'm telling you. So this is why agricultural land now has a lot more value than most people think. All right, so let's keep going. So some of the later phases that we'll do, because he's going to maintain the agricultural use, is he'll develop some indoor courts as well as outdoor courts, and he will then start to build a true sports academy, hopefully comparable to what we see in France. But that's later. What you have to do when you're an entrepreneur is you have to make sure you buy the property, you pay your bills, and you get a viable, fast route to revenue. Like that bunkie model and micro garden model, that's fast. No building permits required. You just buy a bunch of bunkies, plop them on there, and do some leasing, land leasing. It's very, very, very inexpensive, and it's fast. All right. So these are just the future phases that he'll do. So one of the things that Sean surprised me with yesterday is he said, Bruce, you used to talk about what you did with the senators back in the day. This is the last thing I'll talk about today. And even back then, I was issuing scrip. And you've heard me talk about scrip before when I talked about financing. And this was our campaign to bring back the Ottawa Senators. And for 25 bucks, you got yourself a priority registration number. And all you got for your 25 bucks was a certificate that you can see here that allowed you to buy a season ticket for a hockey team that didn't exist. And you got a bumper sticker. So nobody could accuse me of doing a bait and switch. So this was 25 bucks, non-refundable, but you got a bumper sticker and a certificate. So, you know, you got some value for it. And nobody buys one PRN because nobody goes to a hockey game or a football game on their own. They buy two. So for 50 bucks, you got a couple of bumper stickers that cost back then probably 50 cents. They'd be a little bit more expensive today. So this was what Sean did. And just watch this little, video thing, see if it'll work. So what he did was, I think this was yesterday or last night, he posted in a Facebook group that's, pickleball people are fanatics. He posted it and he got a tremendous reaction. So he sent me this note this morning. I just posted this for 10 minutes and I got all kinds of reaction, fast and furious. I think I could get commitment cards made up to secure memberships of $10, fully refundable to secure their spot. This would give us a realistic idea on courts and investment required, right? Are people committed? And so I wrote him back and said, no. We're going to charge for a membership. We're going to charge 25 bucks. Not 10 bucks, and it's going to be non-refundable because you don't want to, let's say you sell 10,000 of the damn things, which is very possible. That's $250,000. You don't want to have to turn around and give it back, right, Jake? Back me up here. Yeah. So what would they get for that. So I said to Sean, we'll print up some of these. You know, I've got some of them myself. I don't know if you can see them here. I've got some coaching wristbands here, you know, these things that I used to give out to people when I actually could see people instead of always being on friggin' Zoom. But when I was started coaching 9.5 years ago, you'd get, you know, you'd get a nice band that says clarity. What else does it say? Keep your perspective. I don't know if you could see it. Okay. What else? What's this one here? I don't know. Focus. That's a good one. And clarity again, or listen. Anyway, so I said we'll do one for people who sign up. They get a band. So they paid $25 for this thing. It's worth maybe a toonie, but that's okay. They know it's going to a good cause. And if we sell 10,000 of them, Sean, we'll make you 250 grand. That'll help you with a few bills, right? And people love branded promotional products. So I said, we'll put scoreacademy.ca, you know, his website on this thing. And I just came up with this morning. I don't know if you guys can tell, it's a little bit of a joke. I'm going to the pickle ball, as in ball game or ballroom dancing or whatever it might be. I'm going to the pickleball. And what amazed me when I was the founder of the Senators and was operating the business was people will pay you to buy your stuff and walk around advertising your business for you. It's great, right? There you go. And then this morning, this happened. We got an email. Sean got this email from Martin Oos. You can see him down here, Martin Oos, not Martin Ass, by the way, Martin Oos. That's a German name. And Martin Oos say, do you know Martin? Anybody know Martin? He's a bright guy. He's really plugged in. And he wrote to Sean saying, our firm has been seeking a site for a paddle club. Paddle is like paddle tennis as opposed to pickleball. It's a little different. For a club we represent, and I saw your tweet, it wasn't a tweet, it was Facebook, that mentioned that your group has secured a site for your tennis project. Perhaps we can do something together. And paddle tennis is a big thing too. This is an article that came out fairly recently, I think. Is paddle tennis the next pickleball? And paddle tennis is I'm pretty sure the group that Martin is working with is headed by Daniel Alfredson. Some of you won't know who that is, but he is the former captain of the Ottawa Senators. So I know Martin, and of course I know Daniel as well. So that was pretty exciting. And I want to show you this, all right? And so what would we do with this kind of lead, all right? And again, this is part of bridging the price gap, financing your projects in novel and interesting ways. Let's say that is Sean, land leases to Martin Oos's group, which is probably Daniel Alfredson, 6 acres. What would you charge for a land lease? The longest land lease you can do without a severance in Ontario is 21 years less a day. All right, so let's say that the property is worth $100,000 an acre. I'm just making up the number. And we can just make it up. We're going to value it at $100,000 an acre. He's not paying $100,000 an acre. I think he's paying like $29,000 an acre. But why would you turn around and give Martin and Daniel Alfredson, who made, you know, who I paid $65 million US to, why would we give it to him for $29,000 an acre? Let's charge him $100,000 an acre. But he's not going to buy it because we're not doing a service. We're doing a land lease. So if you value it at 100,000 and you want to make a cap rate of 12%, it's very easy to figure out what your land lease should be. You multiply 6 acres times 100,000 per acre times 12% means that they should pay a triple net land lease of $72,000 a year for 6 acres. And we would put in an inflation clause because it's 21 years. Every 5 years, maybe you'd increase it, you know, by a few percent. So it would go up, and you would also put in a percentage rent. So whatever revenues they generate on that, some of that should come to Sean. Now, if you did a land lease with that, like that, what is it worth to Sean? Yes, he's getting 12% return, and by the way, a land lease means that they pay the property taxes on it, they pay all the utilities on it. They if they build anything on it, whether they build paddle courts or anything else on it, they're responsible for that, getting the building permits, building it, everything is triple net to the landlord. So Sean would just get his 72 grand totally free and clear. Plus any inflation over the 21 years and any percentage rent. So if you value that revenue stream at 8%, it means that his 72 grand, it will support about $585,000 of debt. That's at 65% loan to value. Okay. I know that's a little bit complicated. If you're ever doing a land lease, reach back to me, I'll help you with it. So I went a little bit over time. Are there any questions before we quit for the day?
Oh, I got tons of questions, but I'll email them to you.
Well, how about one more? We'll just spend 2 more minutes and we'll do one more, and then we'll be 5 minutes over time.
Okay, so you got this land lease. Okay,
Yep.
so you can make up whatever value you want. So the value is intrinsic, right? So it's
I think that, you know, the French put it very well. I think post the French Revolution, a minister of finance for maybe Louis the 15th or something, I don't know, maybe it was before the revolution, said the art of taxation is plucking the maximum number of quills from the goose with a minimum amount of hissing. Because you know, quills were used for pens, right?
Yeah.
And they were very valuable. I mean, you know, if you wanted to write it, you know, you didn't have a big ballpoint pen that you could buy for 60 cents, right? You had a quill. So the art of taxation, it's the same thing that we're doing with art of negotiation, art of bridging the price gap. We're in the business of extracting the maximum number of quills with the minimum amount of hissing from the goose.
okay.
And so when you're, you know, so I looked at that number and I thought, well, could I charge more than $72,000 a year for 6 acres? Probably not. Could I charge less than that? Sure, I could, but I don't want to. So I was thinking about the maximum number of quills for the minimum amount of hissing, right? So that's, I literally made it up. So you have to have judgment, but you know, you're entering into negotiation day. Okay, did I answer your question?
Yes.
That's good. All right, gentlemen and ladies, it was a pleasure to see you all. There'll be a replay of this if you ever want to look at it again. I'll send you out a note, and I'd like you to, if you can, come to the Saturday lecture. It's only 1 hour. I promise on Saturday noon at Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific, and only be an hour. See you later.
Bye,
Thanks,
Bruce.
Bruce.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Bruce. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.